Okay, so the mimer that we're going to be looking at, the discourse, is from 1984, and it's on the Sedra of this week. And so let's have a look at the Sedra. We can find it. Here we are, I think. Right. So here we have so here we have the beginning of the Sedra of the week. Im bechukotai telechu. If you walk in my statutes, ve'et mitzvotai tishmeru, and you keep my mitzvot, va'asitem otam, and you do them. Later on, we'll see that these three phrases, if you walk in my statutes, if you guard my mitzvah, my commandments, and you do them, they'll be explained separately, as like separate statements, separate concepts. And then it says, what will happen then? V'natati gishmeichem be'itam, I will give your rains in their season. V'natna ha'aretz yivula, and the earth will give its produce. Ve'etz hasadeh yiten peryo, and the trees of the field will give their fruit. And it goes on about all the beautiful things that will happen. And it says, V'yishavtem lavetach ba'atzechem, you will dwell securely in your land. V'natati shalom ba'aretz, there will be peace in the land or in the world. Ushechavtem, you will lie down. Ve'ein macharid, no one will be frightening. Vehishbati chaya ra'a min haaretz, wild animals will also stop coming into the land. V'cherev lo ta'avor ba'atzechem, and no sword will pass through your land. So it goes on with a kind of an idyllic picture. It's an idyllic picture. And if we can look at the commentaries, let's just have a look at Rashi. Now, he says, what does it mean? Im bechukotai telechu, if you walk in my ordinances, my laws. He says, one might think this denotes the fulfillment of the commandments, the straightforward keeping the commandments. But the following words, ve'et mitzvotai tishmeru, you will keep my commandments, v'asitem otam, you'll do them. That's talking about fulfilling the commandments. So what is this im bechukotai telechu? How do I explain if you walk in my statutes? As an admonition, now this is what Rashi says, quoting from the Midrash, from Sifra, as an admonition that you should study the Torah laboriously, making effort. The idea of making effort to study Torah is part of the whole idea of studying Torah, not just that it comes easily, but it's something where there's effort. There's a story of a Hasidic Rebbe, I think it was the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rebbe Nachum Mendel, the Tzemach Tzedek. And a man came to him, a Chassid came to him, complaining in Yechidut, in private audience, saying, Rebbe, I don't enjoy learning Torah. It's very hard for me to learn Torah. The Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe, said to him, I envy you, because I do enjoy learning Torah. For me, it's no effort. I envy you the effort that you have to put in to force yourself to learn Torah. So that's so this idea of making an effort to learn Torah. Just say hi to Ruth and to Chesed. Lovely seeing you both. Right. So we're now going to look at the text of the discourse. So it's on this week's Sedra, which here we are, we're able to get it a bit bigger. And I'm just checking. Yes, it's right. Okay, so I'm just coming back to that. Here we are. Right. So let's sing the Maimah melody. Oh ya 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 yo ya yo ba ya yara yara ya bam boom. Oh ya 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 ba yo ya yo. Oh yara ramba ho yara ramba ho. Yo ya yiridamba yamba yo ya yiridamba yamba yo ya yiridamba yamba ho ha ya yambam bam ho ya yambam bam ho ya yo. Right. So here we are. If you walk in my statutes, the Mitzvot tishmenu, and you guard my commandments, and you do them. The old Rebbe, meaning what's called in Yiddish, the Alter Rebbe, meaning Rabbi Shneur Zalman, the first Chabad Rebbe, he passed away in 1812. And he explained Belikutei Torah Pashatenu in his book, his volume of Hasidic teachings. He had many volumes, but there's one particular one that we're quoting here, Belikutei Torah, selected Torah teachings of 4 hours Sedra of the week. The Inyan Bechukotai Telechu, that when it says you should walk in my statutes, that refers al bechinat hachakika Shabbat Torah. That's talking about the aspect of Torah which is engraved. Now look at these words. Chukotai. Now chok means a statute, and chakika means engraving. So Rabbi Shneur Zalman is connecting this idea of a statute with engraving. Now, so what does it mean, engraving? Hainu v'hainu kiyum mitzvot b'machshava. That means engraving is the keeping of the mitzvot in one's thoughts, in one's mind. Shehi b'fchinat chakika, which has got the quality of engraving in the mind. You see, when we think about something, so let's imagine that there's a certain mitzvah, and the person is thinking about it. So we think about it this way, that way. That thought is something which is really part of ourselves. It's not something that we just, can get rid of. It's there inside us. While we're thinking that thought, it's there in our mind. If a person thinks a lot of good thoughts, that is a lot of Torah. It says somewhere in Hasidic teachings, it will actually affect the folds of the brain. It will affect the brain. And I think modern neurology speaks about the way in which all kinds of things that go on in our mind affect actually the whole inner electronic or neurological structures which are set up, the contacts between different ideas. So if a person is thinking about mitzvot, thinking about Torah, thinking about the meaning of Torah, the Hasidic dimension, all kinds of different things, that is what's called the Hakikah. That's what it means, im bechukotai telechu. If you walk in my statutes, that means thinking about it. And then, umashe katuv et mitzvotai tishmeru, when it says you should guard my mitzvot, my commandments, that's talking about al kiyum mitzvot b'dibur. That's about keeping the mitzvot in speech. Now, one way of keeping the mitzvot in speech is by talking about them, by discussing them with another person, by learning Torah, learning the code of law, which defines how to do the mitzvah, studying Talmud, all different kind, or Maimonides, the Rambam, Mishneh Torah, so we can learn, or the Book of the Commandments. So there are various things we can learn which relate to saying, which are relating to the mitzvah. So we've got thought and speech. And after that, the final phrase, v'asitem otam, you should do them. Hainu kiyum hamitzvot b'maaseh, and that is practical action, actually doing the mitzvot in practical terms. V'chashiv kan, and it enumerates at kiyum hamitzvot, the keeping of the mitzvot, b'chol gimel halbushim demachshava dibur u'maaseh, of all the three garments of thought, speech, and action. Now, it's a very interesting idea that the thought and speech and even the action of a person is regarded in Hasidic thought, in Chabad Hasidic thought, as the garments of the soul. The soul is the central actor, so to speak, and the thoughts that the person has in their mind are the innermost garment on the soul. And then comes the speech that the person says, that's the second garment. And then comes the outermost garment, which is action. And so in that way, the person's soul is garbed in the action and the speech and the thinking about the mitzvah, going from the outside inwards. Now, we've just read this commentary on this verse explaining what it is. And I meant to say right at the beginning to give a little two-line summary to what this whole discourse is about. The discourse is basically about the way in which, the means by which we can bring about the beautiful vision which is there in the Torah in the next few verses. Like when we read this verse in the Torah, this is about the study of Torah, and we've just seen it in three different dimensions: thought, speech, and action. And it's going to come to this beautiful idyllic state. Now, the beautiful idyllic state is the time of Moshiach. And so therefore, what we're looking at is two different things that we get from the same section of the Torah, which is the steps leading to Moshiach and the way Moshiach actually is. So the way the time of Moshiach actually is. So that is what is there in this, the verses at the beginning of our Sedra, as explained by Rabbi Shneur Zalman and elucidated by the Rebbe, by our Rebbe in this discourse. Now then the Rebbe goes on and he says, now this service in general, especially as a midrash, which is called the teachings of the Kohanim, it's a midrash, which is quoted by Rashi, and we read it together. When it says, if you walk in my statutes, that you should be making an effort in Torah study, amal, in a way of real effort. Now, there are lots of different kinds of effort. There's intellectual effort, there's practical effort, trying to get the Zoom to work, trying to log on, that's also an effort. So there, or if a person is going to a study session, it might be snow and sleet, and nonetheless, he's going to get to that study session. Nicole, our dear hostess, isn't here this minute. I'm hoping she'll come later. But this Zoom shir began in Nicole's home, and just after she and David got married, and which is going back about 30 years. Now, shortly before it began in her home, we used to have a shir in another place, actually in the Hendon Chabad house in Hendon. And this was before Rabbi Overlander was running the Hendon Chabad house. It had been set up and organized, and basically various different people would come along at different times making a share. So I had a share. Maybe it was Tuesday evening, like this Tuesday evening that we are now, and I had a weekly share with Rabbi Lou. And we would come along, and there would be a little group of people, and we would study some kind of Hasidic teaching or Tanya, something like that. And one time, it was in the winter, and it was and I used to bring, my daughter would come with, and she would make the tea and coffee, and give that to the people at the ship. And one time we came along, and it was, I would drive them, and it was snow, like real thick snow. We had to stop the car. We couldn't get any further. We walked through the snow to get to the Chabad house. And we got there. Now, I can't quite remember if there was one person or if there was no one. But what we did was we gave the share anyway. And there might have been one person, or it might have just been me, Rabbi Lou, and my daughter who had come.
Nobody turned up, Tali.
Nobody turned up.
Nobody
Right. Turned up. There. Wonderful. Were you there?
No.
Well, so there we were, and we gave the share as if there was a group of people. You know, we took whatever text we were going to read. And I suppose we told the share to each other and to my daughter. And I always felt that effort coming there through the snow, that's what opened the door to this wonderful share that Nicole has hosted for 30 years, Nicole and David. It's the most wonderful thing. Now it's on Zoom, but I still see Nicole as our hostess. And I feel that the effort of going through the snow, that was an important part of it. So that's really this concept that we have over here from this midrash, that if you make this effort in Torah, then and so then you have ve'et mitzvot tishmeru v'asitem otam, then you will guard my mitzvot and do them, that the effort that you've made into the learning, shahalimud mevi lidei ma'aseh, the learning of the study of Torah will come out in action. Hinei al yedei zeh, and behold, it's through this. It's through that one comes to all the blessings which are said in the continuation of this section of the Torah. As we read, I will give you your rain in its season. And all the blessings after this, ad legeula, until we come to the actual redemption, which is expressed in the words, the vehithalachdi betochachem. God says, I, God, will walk among you. Now that's a very special thing. God walking among us, that's like God in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve, that the presence of God was there together with Adam and Eve. And so what this is saying is that if we keep the Torah, but not only keep it, we have that extra effort about keeping the Torah, then we will merit the redemption and we will be there together with the divine. That the divine will walk among us, in other words, will be revealed among us, and that will be the tremendous revelation of the time of Moshiach. And then it says another few words, and I will lead you. Now, komamiot is a word that quite hard to translate, and one way a simple way of translating it is upright, but the Talmud discusses this word and it presents it in a slightly more complicated way, which has a Kabbalistic connotation. So let's have a look. The inyan komamiot, what komamiot means, a possible simple translation is upright. You see, koma means height. In modern Hebrew, koma shniyah means the second floor. Yes, the floors of a building are called koma. So koma is like the way a person is standing upright, but komamiyud is like in a kind of a plural. Hu sheyiyu b'komat hadam, that the way that a person stands upright will it'll be like the height of a person, or kishteit komot, or like two heights, right? So they're like two floors. The first floor is like the height of one person, like you'd say 6 feet, 7 feet. And then the two floors is two heights, like 14 feet. To the Itaba Masechet Sanhedrin, it's got a passage about this in the Talmud in Sanhedrin. The Inyan Vehita, so it's something double. This idea of the height of the person, it's really something spiritual. It's talking about something spiritual. And it's talking about the idea that there's some kind of double dimension. You see, the height of the person is a very important thing, because we are here in this physical world. And our whole role is to create in this world a dwelling for the divine. And so what's happening is that there is a certain transformation, or you might call it a deconstruction, that takes place through the coming of Moshiach, so that doors are open or cease to be barriers. And that means that our height, our actual existence, in some sense becomes doubled. And then we go back to the word v'hithalachti, where God says, I will walk among you. Now that itself is a double phrase. It doesn't say v'halachti, which would mean I will walk. V'hithalachti is a reflexive. And who beit halichot, and that's also explained by the sages as a double walking. And this is it's explained in a number of Hasidic texts, that this is a double walking, who shnei halichot, two kinds of walking. And what are the two kinds of walking? Milamayla lamata, from above to below, umilamata lamayla, and from below to above. Now let's just try and understand this. That from above to below means from God to the Jewish people, or God to the individual. It's a kind of flow, it's a revelation that comes from the divine to the individual. And from below to above is the person reaching towards the divine. And so therefore we have the two directions, God reaching to us and we reaching towards God and connecting together. And that's also, I think that's what it means, that makes these two statures, the two komot, the two heights of the person. It's as if one height is the expression is from above to below, and the other height is from below to above. And that's the bond between them. Now we've just got another couple of lines in this section, and then we'll stop and see if we can understand of it. Hainu shel atid lavo, that means in the future, there will be both aspects of movement from above to below. That means revelation of God. And also the quality of seeking God from the individual. And there will be both of them together. And that's also explained on another passage, quoting from a verse in the prophets, which is in Isaiah, "V'samti kam kad kod shimshotayach," an obscure text in which God says, "I will make your windows shimshotayach," like the word shemesh, sun, through which the sun comes. I will make them made of kadkod, which is a kind of some kind of precious thing, and the way in which the Talmud discusses it. It gives different explanations, and it finally says "Kadeinu Kadein," like this one and like that one. In other words, the two different explanations work together. So it's the idea. This word "kad kod" and this passage in the Talmud, which it mentions in footnote 10, which is Bava Batra 75a. It's in the footnote. This Bava Batra 75a is about two different explanations operating at the same time. And so that implies here that in the future, there will be both positive things. The avodah milamata l'mayla, the service reaching to God from below to above, the effort that we as physical human beings make an effort to come closer to the infinite divine, and the response, or it might be the initial action from God coming towards us and inspiring us from above to below. Okay, so let's stop for a moment and see if we understand what we've been reading, or if there's any questions at this stage. Basically, what it's done, it's taken this first verse of the Parsha and explained it in a couple of different ways. One is it's explained it in terms of thought, speech, and action of the Mitzvot. And then it's given a further dimension. It's not just thought, speech, and action, it's extra effort. It's going through the snow or whatever it might be, or making the effort to understand a difficult concept. And then through that, we come to the beautiful promises, which are in this week's Sedra, which tell us about this wonderful idyllic situation. And so that idyllic situation, it suggests, is the coming of Moshiach. You see, the normal way of reading the text is that it's not about the coming of Moshiach. The normal way of reading the text is that it's about going into the land of Israel, and everything will be comfortable in the land of Israel. We'll be very well off and happy, and everything will be good. The only problem is, as the Sedra goes on to say, that if you do not keep the Torah and you break the Torah and you serve idols and you do this and you do that, then all kinds of terrible things will happen, God forbid. And that's what it describes in a long section in the Sedra. And it sounds so gloomy that no one is called up for it. The man who reads the Torah without anyone saying anything, he takes that aliyah and he says the blessing at the beginning and he reads it very quickly. You'll notice if you're in shul, he reads it very quickly. And then he comes to the end and he says that it slows down at the end because it sort of softens out. And then he says the blessing after the Torah, but they do not say, Ya'amod, let so-and-so come to the Torah, which is always like, who's being called up to the Torah and so on. It's a very, it could be a very distressing section of the Torah. It certainly describes terrible things. When you read it, it makes a person think of the Holocaust and things like that. And it's saying that if the Jewish people don't keep the Torah, that's what's going to happen. Now, just to divert for a moment, a section of this kind is read twice in the year. It's here at the end of Vayikra, and there's something at the end of Leviticus, and there's a similar section at the end, towards the end of the book of Devarim, the 5th book. This is the 3rd book. Today, this Shabbat will be concluding the 3rd book. But also there's one at the end near the end of in Kitavo, in the Sedra Kitavo, which is a similar thing. It starts off, you will come to the land, and if you keep my laws, it will be beautiful, and then if you don't, it will be terrible, just like it. So Rabbi Shneur Zalman used to be the Baal Koreh. He used to be the person reading the Torah in the city of Lyozna or Liadi, where they lived. And that was where his Hasidic court was, and that's where his children were brought up. He had several children. And Rabbi Dov Ber, who was a little boy, later he would become the second Lubavitcher Rebbe. So the second Chabad Rebbe. So he would listen, attentively to the Torah. But one year, Rabbi Shneur Zalman was out of town on this Shabbat, like it wasn't this Shabbat, it was the Shabbat Kitavo towards the autumn. And Rabbi Shneur Zalman was away, and another man read the Torah. And when Rabbi Dov Ber, who was a very sensitive person, when he heard the terrible things that were being said in the Sedra about what would happen if people don't keep the Torah, it made him feel ill. It had a terrible effect on him. He was something like 11 years old, something maybe 12. But it had a very bad effect on him. And people said to him afterwards, gave him something to drink, this and that, because he could understand the Hebrew, and it was just so horrific to him. So someone said, but last year you heard it as well. So why does it affect you so much? Last year you also understood the Hebrew. He said, last year my father read the Torah. And when my father reads the Torah, we could say even this passage, there are no curses. There's nothing negative. When he reads the Torah, it's all positive. And so, so obviously there's another way to understand it. And when Rabbi Shneur Zalman read it, that's what it sounded like to his son Dov Ber. But when another person read the Torah, it sounded horrific. Like, if you read the English translation, it sounds terrible. So, but all that is not discussed in this discourse, because what this discourse is exploring is only the beautiful, radiant future. Now, you see, this is the thing. So a simple way of reading this Sedra is that it is telling us that if we keep the laws, then we'll go into the land of Israel and we'll be happy and everything will go well. And if, when we're in the land of Israel, we don't keep the laws, then terrible things will happen and we'll suffer terribly and we'll go into exile. So that's a way, and then eventually we'll come back. Now, that's the normal way of reading it. Here it's being read in a different way. It's that if we keep the laws, and especially if we make the kind of effort that is described in the Midrash, then what will be the result? The result will be this beautiful spiritual revelation of the time of Moshiach, that yes, we will be in a physical world, but it will be a world impregnated by godliness, and God will, so to speak, be walking with us. And we will have this tremendous sense of stature in relation to God, and that it's as if God is reaching towards us and we're reaching towards God at the same time, as if we're double stature all the time. And that's what it's saying. That's its Hasidic message, as explained by Rabbi Shneur Zalman in his book Likutei Torah. So does anyone have any questions about that or comments? We're all okay. Okay, let's go on. Right. Ulahavin. Now we're on the second page, which is page Zayin of the Hebrew text. Ulahavin hashaychut hamiyuchedet ba'avodah now. To understand the particular connection of this service of keeping Torah, Mitzvot, and thought, speech, and action with effort, how that relates to the redemption. Now it is known from the Midrash. These are, it says in the whole Torah, in the whole Tanakh, the whole Bible, the Hebrew Bible, it says twice, Eile Toldot, these are the generations of something or someone, and it's Maleh. Now, what does Maleh mean? Maleh means full. And the word Toldot, if you look at this word Toldot, it's Taf, Vav, Lamed, Daled, Vav, Taf. Now, the way the Hebrew works, instead of having a Vav over here, you could just have the dot, and we would still read it Toldot. And in fact, the second Vav as well, it could be written without that as well. You don't need the Vav. And it could just be a dot on top, and it would be read Toldot. The sages understand the fact that the Vav is written in both places, the second letter and the fifth letter, that is a significant thing. And it's only, apparently, it's only twice in the whole Bible that this word appears with two Vavs. I think it appears many, many times with one Vav. It might appear sometimes with no Vav, but it's just twice where it appears with two Vavs. And the fact that it appears twice links the two times that it occurs. So let's see what they are. Pam achat, the first time, Bivriyat Olam, when the world was created. It says in the Torah, Eile Toldot Hashamayim Ba'aretz, these are the generations. It means generation. These are the generations of the heaven and earth, Behibaram, when they were created. So saying that, and it's giving the account of creation. So saying that is one time that Toldot appears with both Vavs. Upam Sheni, and the second time, Legabe Leidat Peretz. Oh, I'm sorry, it is in the Chumash as well. It's talking about the birth of Peretz. Now, Peretz is the son of Yehuda, Judah, who had a relationship with a lady called Tamar, you might remember. Judah married a woman and had 3 children, 3 sons. And one of them got married to a lady called Tamar. And this son, whose name was Onan, did not want his seed to go into Tamar. Because, and it's obscure, why not? And Rashi says he didn't want her to get pregnant because he thought she was very beautiful. And so he didn't want to risk spoiling that in some sense by her getting pregnant. So he wasted the seed. From there, we have the English noun, onanism, right? It comes from his name, Onan. So Onan was punished by God and died. Now that's actually explained by the sages. It doesn't say it in the text, but that's the way the sages understand. Or maybe Onan is the second son. Sorry, I'm a bit muddled up. The second son was Onan. Now there the text tells us he didn't want to give his seed to her, not because he didn't want to spoil her beauty, but he knew that the child that would be born would be called after his dead brother. It's like levirate marriage. And so he wasted his seed. His name was Onan. That's the second son. So that was Onanism. So then the third son, called Shelah, Yehuda, Judah, the father, didn't want to give this third son to Tamar because he was, or give Tamar to him. He was afraid he would also die. And so he refused to give the boy to her. And she was very upset. And she felt that she must have a child from this family. There's something very significant about this family. And she wants to have a child from this family. She was a Canaanite woman, but she felt that there's something special about this family and she wants to have that child. So she disguised herself as a harlot. And Judah's own wife had died. And Judah walked past where she was sitting as a harlot and in some mystical way was suddenly attracted to her. And she persuaded him to make love to her. And she got pregnant. And he thought people told him, your daughter-in-law, who's not supposed to be with any other man because she's waiting for the levirate marriage with Sheila, she's got pregnant, which means in the way they understood it, she's committed adultery because she was supposed to be betrothed to Sheila, the third son. And he was very upset and angry about this, but then she sent him a sign that he was actually the father, and he said, she's more righteous than me. And there were two sons who were born, and one of them is, and she finally, when she had the baby, it was twins. And one of the babies was Peretz. And Peretz is called, he is the ancestor of Boaz, who married Ruth the Moabite, from whom came King David, from whom comes Moshiach. So there we have the whole genealogy of Moshiach. And the only other place in the Torah where the word Toldot appears in full is with Peretz. So we've got Toldot in terms of the creation of the world, and Toldot in terms of the birth of Peretz, who is the ancestor of Moshiach. The Av Shehem Shnei Inyanim B'Fnei Atzmam, even though these two things are separate concepts, creation and Peretz, and they're in two different times, separate times, because the Toldot, which is there with the creation of the world, is from above to below. It's God creating the world. That's how God created the world in a complete way. Whereas when we're talking about Toldot Maleh, the word Toldot, which is full, which expresses something beautiful relating to Moshiach, how do we get Moshiach? Taking it beyond the actual story of Tamar and Yehuda and parents, but it's leading to Moshiach. How do we get to Moshiach? We get to Moshiach al yedei ma'asenu v'avodatenu, through our actions and service, which is from below to above. So we've got a movement from below to above and a movement from above to below. Nonetheless, this expression of generations with the double vav, which comes about through our actions, causes the exaltation in the Toldot, the generations at the beginning of the Torah. That means in the creation of the world, the way the world was created in its full way, as it was through the Holy One, blessed be He. So God creates the world in a beautiful way, in a wholesome way, symbolized by the two vavs, the fullness of creation. But that fullness of creation comes about through our actions now, you and me, bringing Moshiach. So it's a kind of a cyclic process that we are taking part in, and we are bringing about that it should be the coming of Moshiach now, which relates back to the Toldot Maleh, the fullness of creation, that creation is created ready for Moshiach. Okay, so let's just see if there's any comments at this point. Any question, comment? It's all straightforward. I mean, it's an amazing thing. And it's very interesting the way the actions in a later time affect what God does in an earlier time, because God is above time. So that means that the fact that we are able to live in such a way that we bring Moshiach now has an effect on the way that God created the world 5,782 years ago.
Sorry to interrupt. Could the person who is listening and watching this with the circle of the phone, could you mute, please?
I think Eve just wanted to say something, actually. Eve, you want to say something?
Very noisy coming.
I don't think I was going to say anything. I think it is. The only thing that I was really curious about actually was how Bear's father turned the negativity into positivity.
Say it again. You
told this story about how the the negative, the curses were turned into blessings.
Oh,
When,
right.
Yeah, how did he do it? I mean, what was he thinking, or how would one think about that?
Well, you see, I'm not sure if it's in this part of the Torah or in the part in Kitavot. It says 10 women will bake their bread in one oven. Now that could mean that everyone is very poor and they only have a little bit of dough each. They're all starving, and so 10 women can put their bread in one oven. The other way of understanding it is not that they're poor, it shows their unity together. So it's a matter of how you hear the words and how you see the words, and then from those words you see them in a particular way, and because of that you say the words in a particular way.
I see. Yeah.
It's the tone of voice. It's the tone of voice.
Yeah, but it's also that understanding where it's, okay. That's hard to do, but it'd be marvelous if one could do it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. Okay, so we're going a little bit further with the help of God. Now we're coming to the question of the purpose of creation. Now the explanation of this is as follows. Because the sages said, God desired to have a dwelling in the lower world. That means that there should be a lower world, a world where the evil desire is possible and all kinds of negativity. But it's in that world that God wants to have a dwelling. And that's the real purpose of creation, that God should have this dwelling in the lower world. And that means as far as the upper realms, the whole idea of what the world, why the world is created, that's clear from the point of view of the upper realms. But the whole Elisha B'nai Israel, but the Jewish people, we are the ones who are given the responsibility to make sure that this happens. And so we, through our service, we have to draw down this desire. It's very interesting that the word desire is used, nitava. God had a desire. We have to draw down this desire. Min hata'ava el hakoach, the desire has to move, and we are the ones who engineer this. From the desire, one has a desire for something, but one hasn't got a hope of getting that thing. Then suddenly the hope turns into a potential. Maybe I will be able to get that thing. And from the potential to the action. Now, our relationship with the divine is that we are put in a position through our special relationship with the divine and with the world and with the Torah, that we are able to draw down that desire and manifest it in the world by our actions, that we are able to create that dwelling in the lower world, not only in potential terms, by the fact that God gives us the Torah and then maybe we'll keep it, and so maybe we will actually pull it off, but we actually can keep it and do keep it with the help of God. So we achieve it and it becomes achieved. But through this, Adam, man and woman, become together a partner with God in the work of creation. Through the person, whether man or woman, our service to make this dwelling in actual fact. And this will be completed in the future with the coming of Moshiach, when that aspect of our divine service will be achieved. So one can suggest, says the Rebbe, the fact that this intention, God's intention, it's right at the beginning in the creation. The creation is made in such a way that that's what we're going to do. that gives us the empowerment, Livnei Israel, to the Jewish people, sheyuchlu lasota b'poel, that we should be able to do it in practical fact. So in other words, so first of all, this is explaining the idea that God's intention is that it should be a dwelling for God in the lower world. And God, that intention is the empowerment to us to do it. Now, all that is hinted at in another verse, and the way it's explained by the sages. This is nirmaz gamken, this is hinted at. But what the sages said on the verse, it says right at the very beginning of the Torah, the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And what do the sages say? When it says the Spirit of God, it doesn't actually mean God, it means the soul of the Messiah. That means before the actual physical creation, because that's the very opening lines of the Torah, where nothing has happened yet. God hasn't said, "Let there be light." It's just before anything happened. Nonetheless, and at that point, the world was just water in water. So already there was the idea of the Spirit of the Messiah, the Spirit of Moshiach. And that means that the intention and the purpose was that Spirit of Moshiach would be revealed in the future with the coming of Moshiach. Now, when we look at this, look at these texts, we see that this verse is said before the actual creation, before it says Ele Toldot Hashemayim Ba'aretz V'Baram with the double vav, these are the generations of the heaven and earth. It's this verse with the Spirit of God hovered over the water. It's long before. It's like the second or third verse of the Torah. And even though this comes after the verse, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. Now it's true, it comes after the verse saying in the beginning God created heaven and earth. Nonetheless, the sages say, Shemachshavtam shel Yisrael kodma afilu laTorah. The thought of the Jewish people for God, God's thought of the Jewish people, came before even the Torah. And the Torah comes before the world, Alpayim Shana, 2,000 years. Now, what does it mean, 2,000 years? Before there's a world and sun and moon and stars, and the whole movement of the sun, moon, and stars is what decides what is a year. It's something spiritual. So the Torah comes before the existence of the physical universe, and even before the Torah are the souls of the Jewish people. That the Jewish, from this we understand, the Jewish people come before the world even more than 2,000 years. And if we're saying the Jewish people are there, that includes Moshiach. Shahari Moshiach, because Moshiach, hu hayechida klalit shel Yisrael. Moshiach is the person who exhibits the general yechidah. Now, there are 5 aspects to the soul. There's nefesh, there's ruach. All these words mean soul in one way or the other. And then there's neshama, and then there's chaya, and then yechidah. So the 5th aspect, the deepest aspect of the soul, is called yechidah. And here we're talking not only about one person, like it said that on Yom Kippur, at Ne'ilah, the final climactic prayer on Yom Kippur, the yechidah of each person is revealed. Now, here we have the yechidah, not just of the individual, but of the whole Jewish people. Moshiach is the yechidah, is that quality, this deepest part of the soul of the entire Jewish people. The way Moshiach has an effect on the world is the hagam shu makif milamayla. Even though in this verse in the Torah, the Spirit of Moshiach is like surrounding, it's hovering over the waters. Nonetheless, it relates to the waters and it surrounds them. And in fact, the whole world is sourced in water, as we see that the world was my water and water. And so therefore, this fact of Moshiach being there right at the beginning gives the power that the Jewish people and the Jewish individual, through his and her service, are able to make a dwelling for God in the lower world, which is the whole goal of the coming of Moshiach. And so this story at the beginning, or this explanation by the sages at the beginning of the Torah, highlights the empowerment that we are receiving from God in order to carry through the purpose of existence. Right, so let's go a little bit further. Now, as regards the way in which the Jewish people carry out this service in the world, that they bring the world to its total wholeness. In addition to the fact that that has to take place in the lower world, in the physical world, with the three garments, thought, speech, and action, there is another point. The sages say, ala pasuk, on a verse right at the beginning of creation, or near the beginning, and it's in the Kiddush that we say on Friday night, Asher bara Elokim la'asot, the world that God created la'asot, to do. What does it mean, created to do? And one of the explanations is la'asot means letaken, to put right. So that means God created the world in a kind of flawed or incomplete way, so that we, the Jewish people, should be able to complete it and put it right. And it's the word la'asot, to do, which hints at this tikkun, this putting right, that we are able to do. And our actions and our facing all the challenges of life is the way in which we are able to achieve this and complete the world, as it were, and bring tikkun, bring healing and wholeness to the world, repair the world. And similarly, it is known what it says in Tanya, that all the revelations of the future, tuluyim b'ma'asenu v'avodatenu b'meshech zman hagalut, they depend on our actions and our service during the time of exile. Now, the word ma'asenu, which means action, that's got various overtones, because ma'aseh can mean action, can also mean a story, incidentally, but that's a different thing. We won't focus on that now. Maaseh can mean action. It can also mean forcing someone to do something. There's a phrase, ma'asin ala tzedakah, giving charity. One aspect is giving charity oneself, and another aspect is getting a lot of other people to give charity. So that is also the same word, ma'asin. It's the same verb is being used. So the action, but an action which is an effort and which is getting other people to do it. Similarly, the word v'avodatenu, our actions and our service. Now, avodatenu also milashon kfiyah. That also relates to the concept of being forced to do something, a great effort to do something. Because the main special thing about the service of God is the effort that we make, the struggle that we make. The fact that on one level or another, we are tempted away from doing the right thing, and we have to control ourselves. We have to have a whole fight with ourselves every so often, right? For some people, the fight is once a week. For others, it's once a day. For another, it's once an hour. And for some people, it's every 5 minutes. So there's this struggle that the person has. And that is the amal. Now, that is the way we translate it from the Midrash, Torah Kohanim. We translated the word, Bechukotai telechu, that you will walk in my statutes, that you will be making an effort in Torah. And so there's this effort. It's through this effort that we are going to complete the universe and put right the universe. As it says, Adam la'amal yulad, man is born to work. that the main effort of a person the main service of a person has to be in a way of effort. Now, this is very, going to stop the, that's a very disturbing statement. You might feel that Torah Mitzvot is a beautiful way of relaxing and of enjoying things. And to tell you the truth, it is. It's absolutely beautiful. The only thing is that there are certain points when effort is required. For example, we just had Pesach, and all the effort that goes into making a kosher Pesach, whatever it is, the cleaning, the getting the matzah, the getting this, the getting that, it's, running around. So there's effort over there. And then there might be effort in other aspects of life as well. So it's true, there is a serene, beautiful dimension taking place at the same time. But every so often, sometimes more often, there are points of extreme effort. But those points of effort, not just that they're not negative, they are a very important dimension of the whole process, because it's that effort that we make which is really the point at which we are working to bring Moshiach. That's where it's the effort which brings about the letaked, to put right the world and to complete the creation together with God, so that it will be a world of infinite goodness. Is that okay? People understand it? Yeah. Okay. So now, line 18 on this page 10. Line 18 on page 10. This could have been really a paragraph. They could have made it a new paragraph. I don't know why they didn't. Now, this can be connected also with the idea of the Geula being brought, the redemption being brought about by Moshiach. Moshiach brings about the redemption. Because Moshiach is called Adam, it's called man. Right, so Moshiach is a man, and he's called, and then he goes into a certain verse where it refers to Moshiach as a man. And so therefore, if he's a man, obviously he's a man, but a man in the spiritual sense as well. The idea that Adam la'amal yulad, man is born for effort, applies also to Moshiach. He doesn't have it easy. And that's why it says in the Talmud. Now, the Talmud gives a whole story about Moshiach. Rabbi Joshua ben Levi met Elijah the prophet at the grave of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Right, the grave of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is in Meron in Israel, and Rabbi Joshua ben Levi was there, and he met Elijah the prophet. Okay, so Elijah the prophet didn't die, it says in the Tanakh. His body was swept up to heaven, and they looked for it in the mountains. They didn't find it. So Elijah is present at every Brit, and he taught Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai the Zohar. That's how we have the Zohar, the secrets of the Zohar. And he meets various other people, and in this occasion, it's Rabbi Joshua ben Levi. And he talks, and so Rabbi Joshua ben Levi says to Elijah, I would like to see Moshiach. So he says, well, you can't. Moshiach sits at the gates of Rome, and he sits among poor people who are ill, and everyone is fussing around with their bandages. They're covered with bandages there at the gates, and they are like slowly taking off their bandage, putting on a bandage. And for Moshiach, he's also there among them, and he's also got bandages, but he's hurrying very fast to fix these bandages. So he's much more faster taking off the bandage and putting it back on, because he says, maybe I will be needed to be revealed, and I don't want to delay the process. So in order to come and reveal himself as Moshiach. So I think what this story means, this story from the Talmud, the way the Rebbe is telling it here, is that Moshiach is going through a kind of effort. There's an effort that Moshiach is going through. Now, the story isn't told in this discourse, but in the Talmud, Rabbi Joshua ben Levi finds Moshiach at the gate of Rome, travels all the way there, finds Moshiach, says to him, when are you coming? And Moshiach says, today. And Rabbi Joshua ben Levi is so pleased. But then the sun, which was high in the sky, starts getting lower and lower, and finally it's sunset, it's dark, 3 stars come out, it's nightfall, it's the next day, and he's very upset. And he goes back eventually and finds Elijah the prophet again, and he says, he didn't tell me the truth. Why? What did he say? He said he's coming today. Ah, said Elijah, he means Hayom, today, im b'kolo tishmau, if you listen to God's voice. So, which is a verse. So it's the eternal today, which we have to make that today become today, our today now, this Tuesday. Now, so that's also what is written at the end of the Torah, at the end of the book of Leviticus. Sorry, find the right place. Here we are on the last page. That's also what it means if you walk in my statutes. And that means, as we said at the beginning, the service with the 3 garments of thought, speech, and action. And even though they are garments of the soul, nonetheless, through them, we keep the Torah and its mitzvot. And in the same way as we have the other explanation from the Midrash about the effort that we make keeping the Torah, learning Torah and keeping Torah. And that is really the engraved letters in the soul. And through this, we get to all the beautiful blessings which are there at the rest of this section of the Torah. And it says in the Zohar that the Holy One, blessed be He, looked into the Torah and created the world. And human beings, you and I, we look into the Torah and we keep the world in existence. And keeping the world in existence, it's not just keeping it going in a negative way or in a limping way. It's we lead it through our keeping the Torah properly. We bring to the world all the promises that are going to be after that, which are written in the Torah, in the Sedra, that I will lead you till we come to the one, I will lead you upright. And especially after the promise of the previous Rebbe, that we are standing already at the time of the heels of Moshiach. We're asymptotically close to the coming of Moshiach. And very swiftly will be kept that promise that God says, I will walk among you and I will be for you as God, quickly and speedily in our days with the coming of Moshiach, Sid Kingdom. That is the promise of this beautiful discourse.